the peanut stand and heard a rubber band. I seen a needle that winked its eye. But I be done seeing about everything when I see an elephant fly.
What you say, boy?
The third single-narrative Disney animated film is 1941's Dumbo, about a young elephant with oversized ears, facing bullying, and eventually finding success with the very trait for which he has been picked on, as these ears can act as wings and allow him to fly, like a crow. While its plot is silly, and a little more overtly for young children than the previous films, it has a more mature theme about the problem of bullying and the success of an underdog. While a bit limiting in its range of female personalities as either stuck-up bullies or loving domestic figures, I generally don't have an issue with the portrayal of female characters, and my problems with the film are more about racism and child abuse than gender issues. What possibly gives this film a leg up on its gender portrayals is that a woman co-wrote the story that the script was based on, a children's book of the same name by Helen Aberson and her husband Harold Pearl. Disney quickly bought the rights, and the project was taken over by a bunch of dudes, but a woman working on the foundation may have led to an overall respectful gender portrayal. The film starts with stork deliverymen delivering babies, in accordance with the popular excuse that parents give when they're so scared about telling their children about sex that they just make up absurd stories to explain where babies came from. Now, isn't that against the spirit of Pinocchio? Did the parents stop being real people and turn into wooden puppets with tree branches growing out of their faces when they told whoppers like that? Ah, hypocrisy. A song about the stork process plays. It has some clever innuendo that would go over kids' heads, while meaningfully telling adults that they shouldn't expect to live unburdened by parenthood forever with their presumed active sexual lifestyle. Birth control, which at the time consisted of barrier contraceptives like condoms and cervical caps, was controversial. The first wave feminist movement fought heavily to bring knowledge of it into the mainstream, to allow women sexual freedom. In the 1910s, women went to prison just for talking about it, as it was considered a deep perversion of natural order. It wasn't until 1936 that it was legalized in special cases where a woman wouldn't be able to survive pregnancy. Despite this criminalization, contraceptive production and distribution was largely unregulated due to widespread below-board appreciation of the ability to have sex without pregnancy. It was specifically public endorsement or advertisement that was scrutinized. By 1938, First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt was publicly endorsing family planning. In 1941, family planning was generally supported but still controversial, similar to modern views on gay families. Walt Disney presenting the arrival of Mr. Stork as an inevitable consequence of adulthood is him being conservative, by pretending that birth control doesn't exist. The opening follows a particular stork as he delivers the protagonist to his mother. The joke with him is that he acts like a real delivery man, comedically fumbling around, while also being this fantastical stork giving someone her baby. If this neutral character could be female, I wouldn't have any complaints about the range of female personalities in the film. The new mother is an elephant named Mrs. Jumbo, a reference to Jumbo the elephant, a circus elephant exhibited by P.T. Barnum in the late 1800s. Having been dead for 56 years, Mr. Jumbo isn't there to raise his son, which raises the question, are fathers and mothers even needed in this sexless stork world? Why didn't the Storks give Geppetto his own kid when he was in his prime, and not have to depend on a random prayer to animate a puppet when he was an old man? Also, where do stork children come from? Mrs. Jumbo shyly names her baby Jumbo Jr., a respectable name. A group of well-to-do elephant women eagerly greet the new baby until he reveals his enormous ears, which cause the women to reveal their mean sides. The especially proud lead elephant woman is scandalized by the thought that an elephant could be different, and encourages the others to be nasty, one of them nicknaming Jumbo Jr. as Dumbo. It is weird that the kid's name as Jumbo Jr. is practically unknown. It's like a piece of expert trivia, like that Donald Duck's middle name is Fauntleroy. Ask anyone who's seen the movie and they'll tell you that the character's name is Dumbo. This has really bothered me for years. It's a mean nickname. Not just a name confusion like with Frankenstein being the name of the doctor and not his creation. It's like if you're called Fatso by some bullies when you're a kid, and people just keep on calling you Fatso throughout life, and then you become famous and show your bullies what you're really worth. And everyone in the world just keeps on calling you Fatso. And when you die, Fatso is on your tombstone, and your real name becomes a piece of expert trivia.
This sucks!
At least part of the reason for the film calling him Dumbo is the original book doing so. Copies of the book are prohibitively expensive, so all I have to go on are shots of it in a featurette. The character thought of himself as Dumbo, so maybe there was a scene better justifying it. A picture book adaptation of the movie has Mrs. Jumbo deciding to call him Dumbo out of spite, so that he would succeed with the bad name, and this could draw on the original book's justification, but the movie itself doesn't have something like this. It's closer to the Fatso thing. I've gone back and forth on what I should call the character in this review. The official name is Dumbo. I wouldn't refer to Tarzan by his birth name John Clayton. Even Superman I'd hesitate to call Kal-El. In this case, however, there is a point to be made about dignity in the face of bullying, so forget about naming conventions. I'm calling this kid Jumbo Jr. I like the portrayal of the bullies. It's realistic in a way that doesn't get a lot of spotlight. Proper society women following the lead of a very mean lady, and they're being hurtful out of realistic bigotry instead of cackling evil queen villainy. Disney storytelling has a long way to go before it's at the level of Beauty and the Beast, but I can see the germ of a Gaston in there. It's also nice that there is recognition of male vulnerability when faced with female bullies, but I have to wonder if audiences would accept that as readily without the age dynamic. The bullying tactics displayed are classic. We would assign labels like concern trolls and sea lioning if we were talking about people on the internet today. It's interesting that these tactics are now associated with men, but are portrayed here with female antagonists. It may have to do with a context in which physical intimidation is out of the question, where bullies must rely on social intimidation and wordplay. We'll see the black-coated crows similarly use wordplay to mock the white-coated Timothy. Mrs. Jumbo protects her son, but trouble arises when Jumbo Jr. is teased by a human bully, an obnoxious jerk of a boy. She tries to protect Jumbo Jr. and grabs the bully to save him, but goes a step further and spanks the bully. She is seen as a mad elephant and is attacked and imprisoned. This is the fourth example of spanking children being portrayed normatively in Disney animated films. First, the deleted Snow White scene, where Doc kicks Dopey's butt, then the Pinocchio cuckoo clock, Yen Sid swatting Mickey in Fantasia, and now this. It's a cultural dissonance because spanking would have been seen as good parenting in the era that it came from, but it shouldn't be seen as any more acceptable to the modern eye than the racist stuff. The Dumbo example is especially egregious because it depicts a mother being a good parent by spanking someone else's kid. Something that Mad Men Episode 3, Marriage of Figaro, actually used for shock value because it's an example of something acceptable in the 1960s that is totally unacceptable now. The point of the scene is that Mrs. Jumbo is behaving like a responsible human parent of the day and is misunderstood by the ringleader because it's unacceptable for a circus elephant to just grab people, and it's a joke about the cartoonish reality not being agreed upon by all of the characters within it. However, it shouldn't be acceptable in modern times and may not even be that understandable anymore. Poor Jumbo Jr. is left on his own, and he soon gets a friend in the form of a mouse named Timothy. Kind of a furry Jiminy Cricket who can terrify elephants. In real life, elephants have bad eyesight and don't see mice until they move quickly near the elephants, so mice can startle them, but ignorant people interpret this as big elephants hilariously thinking that tiny mice can hurt them. So this is a cliche that shows up in cartoons. Timothy is kind of like a friendly monster, like the reluctant dragon, who can be nice to Jumbo Jr., but scare the bullying old women. He takes it upon himself to turn Jumbo Jr. into a star, leading to a big finish performance that ends disastrously when Jumbo Jr. trips over his own ears. Honestly, the real problem seems to be that no one practiced beforehand and didn't really know what to do, elephant women included. Jumbo Jr. is demoted into a clown. which seems to me to be perfect for his skill set, except that he's expected to do something athletic again. But everyone acts like being a clown is a horrible thing.
Made him a clown.
A clown?
No.
They made him a clown. Socially, he's washed up.
From now on, he is no longer an elephant.
Well, Walt Disney was a notorious classist and a very strict boss. He did not like employees asking for higher wages, and the clowns serve as a mockery of the employees that he didn't like. A rude and selfish working class.
Oh, we're gonna hit the big buck for a race.
Yes,
Jumbo Jr. essentially gets kicked out of the middle class that he was born into, and has to slum it with the working class. That the focus is on him needing to regain his worth and rise out of poverty as a personal issue, instead of portraying poverty as a bad environmental problem, illustrates Disney's conservative American values, viewing poor people as innately bad people who suffer because of their flaws, while good people can become wealthy by committing to virtuous behavior. Not dissimilar from the themes of Pinocchio, where good boys go to school to better themselves, and bad boys' sins lead to them becoming donkeys and getting sold into slavery. Timothy takes Jumbo Jr. to visit his mother, leading to the saddest scene in all of Disney. You know they used to play this on the Disney Channel? It made me tear up every time. And, while the working class clowns are being jerks to their boss, they neglectfully allow alcohol to taint the drinking water that Timothy and Jumbo Jr. drink, and they suffer a really bad trip. I mean, technically you can hallucinate from drinking alcohol, but Disney makes it look like LSD. It's like reefer madness, scaring the kids straight by lying to them. You hear that, kids? Don't drink or you'll turn into donkeys and get sold into slavery, or you'll hallucinate pink elephants and wake up in a tree. Except for Bacchus and his friends, they'll be just fine. In 1941, pink was still acceptable as a masculine color, so the pink elephants are male, as characters are by default. If the movie came out today, I imagine that the pink elephants would be female by default, on association with the color pink. Based on the trailer, it appears that the remake will sidestep the question of whether to add more female characters, or subvert gender roles, by just making the pink elephants be inanimate bubbles. Jumbo Jr. drunkenly flies into a tree, and they wake up in the branches, where they are greeted by them. Okay, let's talk about race in this movie. Keep in mind that this comes right off the heels of 1940s Fantasia with its racial caricature Sunflower, a character whose official merchandise looks like this. That racial stereotyping continues in Dumbo with first black roustabouts, unskilled workers, and then the crows. The roustabouts sing,
We work all day, we work all night, we never learn to read or write. We don't know when we get our pay, and when we do, we throw our pay away.
It's a very othering portrayal of black workers during the 1940s. It portrays these workers as illiterate weirdos who foolishly gamble instead of growing their wealth. Of course, we know from Pinocchio that Disney hates gambling, but there is a richness to what the white characters are allowed to do with their vices that is absent from the portrayal of these guys. There's a real sense of gawking at the strangeness of the black people over there, instead of accepting them as real people with depth. Like the ringleader, who you might be able to sympathize with, as a guy who has to do a lot, and maybe forgive some of his harshness, because you understand him as a person. He's not just a man who, for some bizarre reason, would throw away what he earns. If one of those black workers were treated with the respect of the ringleader, you'd understand that he has his vices, and these may not be respectable, but you'd accept it, because you'd understand him as another person. Instead, all of the black workers are treated with an othering gaze, where they're practically not even treated like people. They're really not that different from the white supremacist portrayal of slaves. Similar to the black ape creatures in Pinocchio, kept at a distance from the white characters, and disrespected so that their own vices are portrayed as the reason for their lack of advancement, into the kind of people worthy of respect, not white supremacy.
Keep on working, stop that shirt, and grab that rope, Harry.
And here we come to the crows, caricatures of black people in animal form. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with depicting black people as animals. This is a talking animal movie after all. Or even crows in general. However, these particular crows are present in a specific racist context, referencing minstrel shows in a non-critical light. Similar to the goldfish in Fantasia, evoking the contemporary racist depiction of Arab women. The lead crow's name is Jim Crow, in a reference to a racial caricature from white supremacist pop culture. In its original form, Jim Crow is an 1828 minstrel show character, an old slave who can barely walk but still gets by, loosely based on a real person. White theatrical performer Thomas D. Rice would don blackface and do a song and dance as Jim Crow, where he would imitate the movements of the crow animal, as a visual pun referencing the word crow as a slur for black people.
Wheel about and turn about and do just so. Every time I wheel about I jump Jim Crow.
Similar to the legacy of the character Uncle Tom, Rice's version of Jim Crow had some anti-slavery themes that were dismissed by pop culture. In 1832, he added 3 verses advocating a black-white solidarity to end slavery, with lines like, "Should they get to fighting, perhaps the blacks will rise, for their wish for freedom is shining in their eyes." White supremacist pop culture totally forgot about that, and it instead used the figure of Jim Crow as a pejorative reference to black people. The most infamous use is as a label for race segregation laws, colloquially called Jim Crow laws, which back then was just a colorful way of saying black people laws. In 1941, Jim Crow laws were very relevant. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was actively fighting segregation. It would have been popular to read about in newspapers, and the original Jim Crow minstrel show would have been performed in contemporary media. It makes for a topical reference, but Dumbo's handling of it was insensitive. The Crow characters evoke the Jim Crow minstrel show, with the character Jim Crow played by a white man. Each character design representing a black stereotype, and the animation style blending rotoscoped black dancers with crow-like movements. It plays up the crow racial caricature visual pun, and others them within the talking animal group. Their black coloring codes them as black characters in a way that does not apply when white people take animal form, as with Jumbo Jr. and Timothy being, respectfully, gray and brown, and not literally white. White people are not expected to be crows, and black people are not expected to be elephants, mice, or any other animal featured. There is segregation among talking animals, with white people being diverse animals in center focus, and black people as those crows over there that you can tell are black because of their black features, similar to the racially coded fish characters in Fantasia. Like with Rice inserting abolitionist sentiment in his minstrel show, there is a bit of nuance that shouldn't be overlooked that makes the crows more racially progressive than contemporary depictions. As segregated as they are, they have a dignity that stands in defiance of stereotypes, social codes, and even Jim Crow laws that try to enforce a standard of black submission. The crows speak to Timothy as an equal, not kowtowing to him, not calling him sir, and Timothy responds to them as people on his level. Even though they're essentially yelling at each other, it's a lot friendlier than most contemporary depictions of interracial discourse. The crows also display intelligence that rivals Timothy's, coming up with good ideas, and singing a song that uses clever wordplay to mock him. That is a stark contrast from the quiet submission of Sunflower. On the other hand, the crows being antagonistic with wordplay puts them in the same category as the snobby elephants. They're essentially bullies with racial caricature features, insensitively calling to mind segregation in minstrel shows. They don't really challenge negative perception, and there's nothing in their subversiveness as extreme as even Rice's call to war to end slavery. If the Crow song mocking Timothy had thrown in a line condemning lynching, which was very much a thing at the time, then it would be as equally progressive as a 108-year-old racist minstrel show. In the absence of overt language challenging racism, it is less progressive than that. Modern Disney's official stance on the Crows is that they are racially progressive because they are oppressed and can recognize Jumbo Jr. as a victim like them and want to help him out of solidarity.
As an alienated group themselves, they sympathize with his plight, being ostracized because of his physical being.
They made him a clown!
So it's kind of a brilliant juxtaposition there.
Wow. That is a stretch worthy of Elastigirl.
They're like surrogate fathers.
The way the scene is shot has the crows making fun of Timothy's suggestion that an elephant could fly, hurting Jumbo Jr.'s feelings, receiving a good talking to by Timothy, and then feeling guilty when they care about Jumbo Jr. and deciding to help him out of the most basic compassion. There is nothing in here about the crows being empathetic because they themselves suffer bigotry. They're portrayed as powerful jerks, able to bully, and Timothy makes them be better people by talking about Jumbo Jr.'s suffering. All the focus is on the white characters. Really, Disney, how stupid do you think we are?
They made him a clown!
As I described in my Fantasia review, I would like Disney to handle their racist content the way that Warner Brothers does, by keeping it intact and displaying a prominent message owning up to their racism, apologizing for it, and not lying. We all know what happens to liars. Anyway, Timothy figures out that Jumbo Jr. used his ears to fly up into the tree, but has some difficulty convincing him that he can. Timothy guilts the crows into helping, and Jim gives him a crow feather to say is magic, to act as a placebo, and give Jumbo Jr. confidence to fly. It seems to work. When it comes time for his big act, he drops the feather at a crucial moment. Timothy convinces Jumbo Jr. that the magic was inside him all along, and he finds the strength to fly. He shows up all his doubters and becomes rich and famous, being able to save his mother somehow. Yeah, that's never explained. The crows sing him a farewell as he leaves into the hopeful future. The film ends on a very political message, that the United States should enter World War II with a strong aerial force, and that this would lead the country to success. One of the newspapers showing Jumbo Jr.'s newfound fame describes him being used as a figurehead as the country enters into the war, and the scene of him showing up his bullies portrays him as a warplane firing a machine gun. His bountiful riding off into the sunset symbolically welcomes a new era of aerial warfare against the Axis powers. Walt Disney was a fan of Russian-American strategist Alexander P. de Seversky's writings on the subject of American aerial dominance, and would later hire him to write Disney's 1943 propaganda film Victory Through Air Power, also known as the source of all these Nazi clips. Their propaganda era is largely ignored in modern Disney marketing, but we can see Dumbo as a transitional film beginning it. Dumbo is far from perfect. Its female character depictions are limited to the mother and bully archetypes. The child abuse element is nasty. The roustabouts are a racist caricature. And the crows are a terribly misguided attempt at racial progressivism, if indeed that is what they are. However, Dumbo does represent a minor improvement. The gender dynamics are better than what was seen before, the crows are at least better than Sunflower, and the overall message about it being okay to be different, that your differences can even be the reason for your success, and not simply an obstacle, is much better than the messages of the previous films. Dumbo is a historical artifact, a snapshot of a worse time in American history, but it's also a sign of better things to come. A live-action adaptation is coming out soon. I can only hope that it fulfills that promise of hope and brings social consciousness appropriate to modern-day values. We shall see.
Happy landing, son! When I see an elephant fly, I wish I'd have got his autograph.
Oh man, I got his autograph.
Please like, share, subscribe, and consider donating to my Patreon. Pledges of $2 or more will earn you an explicit thank you at the end of each video. Thank you.